Welcome, Latria, to to this edition of Founders Talk. This is the Women's Month edition. You're going to kick it off for us. But before we do that, Latria, here's what I would love for you to know about Rally is that the purpose or why we exist is to help passionate entrepreneurs to transform their existing or their ideas or existing work into sustainable ventures that create positive social change. And one of the cool things is that we believe Central Florida can be a hub for social entrepreneurs. And so no matter where they're at around the world, they should make a stop through here. And the reason why is because we have all the talent, the resources, the networks to propel people along, that journey. And you happen to be one of those people. So we get the pleasure of showcasing you to folks and building the case on why Orlando is what it is and what greater person to have than you. So welcome to Founders Talk.
Awesome. A pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody, for having me.
Good. Well, listen, we love to start these things off talking about something that you're very familiar with, but haven't probably thought about for a while, and that's baby Latria. Who is baby Latria, right? Like, and when I'm not talking about baby Latria, the one who likes macaroni and cheese and apples slices, but I'm talking about baby Latria in terms of who she is and what set her up for the things that she cares about and who she is today. So if you can just kind of walk us through like those aspects of just growing up that influence who you are today and the work that you care about, that would be really cool.
Okay, yeah. So baby Latria was born in Jacksonville, Florida at Baptist Hospital. I think one of the biggest, I guess, segues into this and me being a servant leader and knowing how to share is I came into this world with a twin. So I am an identical twin who still lives in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm the baby of 5 kids, actually. I grew up in Jacksonville. Very good childhood, was very active in a lot of activities. I think as far as influence, I looked up to my brother, my older brother. His name was Dominic. He was into a lot of sports at the time. And so I started wanting to play basketball, and my other older brother played soccer. So I played soccer. And so they were very influential into my love for sports. And then my mom was very active in the community. She was she was a hairdresser, and on certain weekends she would go to nursing homes and do some of the residents' hair for free. So that was her giving back, and we would go with her. And of course, at the time I would complain like, oh man, we gotta use our Saturday to go into the nursing home, smells in there, like all this stuff. We would complain. But when their faces when she came in and how they would light up was just amazing. But my mom really loved giving back. She worked the polls all the time, so was very adamant about people exercising their right to vote and advocating through that. So I would say that she was the most influential. And then there were people at school. I went to Raines High School in Jacksonville, so I'm a Mighty Viking. And one of the library counselors saw that I had an interest in media production, started grooming that. And this guy, Earl Kitchens, just came along, was like, this girl has some talent here. And so they took me under their wing. Was very rough initially, but now I understand why they were so adamant, because I was like, well, I kind of want to have fun too. I am a kid, so I don't want to be spending all my time in studio and doing all this extra stuff, but I'm glad that I did in the long run. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
that's baby Latria.
so, so I mean, I think it's kind of cool to hear that like you said, you're a twin, and the way you described it is that being a twin, I believe, if I remember this correctly, it's like you had to learn how to share very early on.
Yeah, all the
I mean, I
time.
guess from the very beginning, you had to figure out how to share, right?
Yeah, she was
Um,
all the food in my mother's womb. So she was heavier than me when we came out, and so yeah,
yeah.
she took from me. So
So
I
you
was
always
used
been giving of yourself
yeah, I've been giving
from the
all
very
my
beginning,
life.
all your life,
Yeah.
and then your mom, had this obviously a spirit of being a servant and giving back because she understood how these um, individuals who live in these senior assisted homes, I mean, that's a lonely life. Like, when I think about my father and, he lives in a senior home, and I think about a lot of his lamenting is around the loneliness, and he gets really sparked by when people come in and spend time with him. So I can imagine how that was for you. And so you get an opportunity to see this, and then also simultaneously being influenced by your brothers in sports. We can actually see how you ended up doing what you end up doing today. But moving from there, like you went to what's that university in the swamp? But I mean, who puts a
Standard.
university in a swamp? I mean, that's the number one question. But we'll leave that for later on. But you went to that university in the swamp called Florida, and
The
and you
haters will hate.
and you study. And what did you study over there? Did you study media relations or did you
Journalism. So it was called
journalism?
communication news, and I
Okay.
minor in sports management.
Oh, okay. Was that intentional? The
Yeah,
sports management component of it?
yeah. Well, yeah, because at the time they're all sophisticated now, but at the time they didn't have a track for sports journalism
Mm-hmm.
specifically. So to get some more insights into sports, I decided to take the management track, which was a part of the health and human performance. But in that process, just became fascinated with the business of sports too. So it was kind of something happening that I had not been exposed to realize the capacity of sports beyond just the game. So
Right.
yeah, that
So,
was the track.
and when you left out of college, what was the thought? Like, were you thinking to yourself, I want to go work for a team, or you didn't know?
Yeah, so when I left college, I had two offers to go and intern with ESPN in
Mm-hmm.
Bristol, Connecticut, or go to the Orlando Magic as a community relations intern. And obviously, those are two different opportunities, right? So ESPN, sure enough, it's like that sports journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Magic, it was a community relations intern, which I didn't really know that there was behind, the coaches and the players, this whole operations that
Right.
focused on the operations of the team. And so that was intriguing to me because I had the opportunity to learn because I did have a passion for giving back. I was in the sports environment and I know how to take an environment if I'm still interested in sports journalism to satisfy that fulfilling within the opportunity. Plus, I didn't want to go to all the snow. I mean,
Yeah,
Florida
Bristol's
girl.
pretty rough.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, no.
I'm sorry, Shay. I
Sunshine.
know you're on here, but
Well, I
yeah,
like that, Latoya, I like that decision point. Like, I feel like social entrepreneurs have places like that all the time where you have this opportunity to go down a path where it's predictable. And then there's this like path of curiosity and
Yeah,
continuing to learn. And I feel like over and over again, the type of person that is entrepreneurial, especially that wants to be a problem solver, that idea of like open-ended curiosity, unscripted, is energizing, you know, like where it's like,
Yes.
oh, it's more exciting to follow a path and see what will happen rather than this is where I know what will happen. And there's not a right or a wrong there, but I feel like when we're choosing for curiosity, when we're choosing for learning, there's entrepreneurial behavior and potential there to start new things. And it's almost like with entrepreneurs, we have to discipline ourselves not to follow every new rabbit trail, you know? It's like, so knowing when to
Yeah.
pick the rabbit trail is good skill.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
focusing on you know, eliminating distractions. I'm like, oh, I'll get excited
Yeah,
about
that's
something,
good.
like, yeah, I'm curious about that. Let me dive into it. But that's a really good perspective, because it's a risk, you know, it's also can be seen as taking a risk too. It's like, well, it's not really what you wanted to do. So you're gonna go in here and take a risk on your career. And so
It's
I like
totally a
that.
risk. It's totally a risk. And what's interesting though for me is people will ask, are entrepreneurs necessarily risk takers? And the thing I end up saying is like there is risk involved in starting things, but entrepreneurs don't tend to be risk takers in the way that like gamblers are risk takers or thrill
Yes.
seekers are risk takers. It's just that we're okay with the risk because the problem is so compelling. And so we're willing to try new things in order to address the problem. So there is risk involved in it, but I don't think of myself as a risk taker.
Yeah.
I relate
Yeah.
more to problem solving and learning. Yeah.
Love it. Love
So,
it.
so the reason why you, so the thing that was compelling about the MBA internship was the community component of it, and just the fact that you were like, oh, this is an aspect of the business that I had never considered, and somehow it tapped into this servant aspect of you. Is that the reason why you would say that it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I could, in looking at the description of the job, it fulfilled more things that I was passionate about
Mm,
versus a career focus. Because in college, I did pledge, did the sorority thing, Delta Sigma Theta, and we were a public, you know, service organization. So we did a lot of community service, and I just felt like the track aligned with my life. And then just going, what I talked about earlier, going to
yeah.
volunteer with my mom, you know, it made sense for me.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense.
The other
Okay.
thing too, Cal, I want to add too, is like I didn't as crazy as I was about sports, I was never exposed to the business operations of sports. And so for me, I was in Jacksonville, had never had an opportunity to visit I think that the Jaguars were there at the time, but never, you know, did a behind the scenes tour or anything. I had done that for news. So doing the media production, they took us to the local news station. I saw the anchors, the green screen, and that stuff was exciting, but had not been exposed to, man, you can actually have a finance major, but a goal to work in the sports industry, because there is a finance department, there is a general counsel. If you're trying to pursue law, there is, you know, marketing, a full marketing and event experience team. It was, for me, it was fascinating because I didn't know that all that stuff was happening behind the scenes. I just saw what was on the
Yeah.
court or what was on the field.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. So you had this. So you went to the Magic, and then you somehow ended up in cause marketing. Was cause I get the sense that cause marketing didn't really exist.
It did, and I created it there.
Okay. And so let's talk about that. Like,
Okay.
what did you see? What was the argument to get them to embrace this? What it like? What talk to us about that?
Well, yeah. So the team at the time, I'm just going to put it out there, they weren't doing well. They had a bad record. They were horrible. And as you know, in operations, part of the revenue generally comes from corporate partners. They're investing into the team to market their brand and so that they can do co-branded initiatives. But most of the assets were associated with in-game assets. So, when you're watching a game, seeing that on the, the everywhere throughout
Jumbotron,
logos, jumbotrons, all that stuff. But people weren't coming to games, so you couldn't really sell that from an attendance standpoint. And we just were not we just were not getting the media attention that we would typically get. And so one thing that we were really good at from a brand reputation standpoint was our presence in the community. And there was strong value to that. And brands wanted to be aligned with us as champions in the community. And so I think Alex Martins did a really good job of ensuring that in all that we were doing, in all of our core values, is making sure that that community standpoint stood out, not only as part of an investment strategy, but also in volunteer engagement. So I was over our Magic, it was called MVP Magic Volunteer Program. We had a culture where you were allowed to volunteer on business hours. So you could be working, but you can go out and volunteer in the community. That was actually encouraged. And so the corporate partners were just fascinated with that and that culture. And so what I did was started helping the corporate partnership teams present different programs or platforms that they could present to corporate partners that came on board as a co-branded initiative, so that there would be some partnership there. And it blew up. It started getting to a point where reps and partners was like, oh, well, we own homelessness. Like, we have an initiative with United Healthcare in this homelessness initiative we built. And they're like, oh, well, no other partner can do that. I'm like, well, now wait a minute, let's play nice.
Yeah.
So I had to bridge the corporate sales team, the community relations team, as well as the corporate activation team to work together to develop these platforms around cause marketing, but also making sure that there was this fine balance between pimping nonprofits. So we didn't want that. We didn't want partners to come in, own and get naming rights to different initiatives in their co-branding, and it was a great benefit for us, but it was not a great benefit from the nonprofit. So being able to understand the metrics and measurables and impact that we needed to do for the benefit of the nonprofit was critical to that partnership. And so in some instances, I would not stamp on to a deal, because if it came across in any way as not authentic and not putting the nonprofit in the best position to solve their mission, then we do ourselves a disservice. So that was a very hard thing to do, because you're looking at 3 different players I'm managing the Magic brand and trying to stay focused on our areas of alignment. And then there's this corporate partner brand who may have totally different focus areas of their engagement strategy and what they're investing in, and making sure there's an alignment there, and then layering in the nonprofit piece, and making sure that the nonprofit is involved in the conversation and part of the collaboration. So it was a complex problem. We had not thought about community outreach in that way. A lot of our community outreach prior to was just, showing up to the Boys and Girls Club with a player, having a fun day, seeing smiles, and we're out of there. So
and so when it moved, go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was just gonna say that that's like a, it's so interesting what you're talking about, this like fine line of creating an experience that accomplishes a mission for a nonprofit and creates value for a brand, that wants to be so. And it's what an interesting position to be in as kind of the broker of like three different things at the same time. And um and it is like it's a kind of a classic social enterprise challenge, of like constantly checking yourself. And you are in the seat that a social entrepreneur is a lot of times, where you can you're the only one who knows how effectively you're actually solving problem number one, right?
Yeah.
And so like you have to develop your own sense of rigor around how much am I actually addressing the problem that the nonprofit is trying to address, and then how am I meeting the needs of these two other constituents, the user of the Orlando Magic and the customer of the brand that's connecting and funding the whole thing. But that's like a we work with social entrepreneurs with that a lot. Is like, how are you balancing the user, the customer, and the problem that you're trying to address? And where's the money going? Where's the rigor around the there's a lot happening in that one experience. How long were you doing those types of events?
Oh man, I spent 10 years in the league. But when I got on the community relations cause marketing side, I would say that was about 6 of the seasons that I was there. So,
Okay.
started off in it in an entry level phase was as a coordinator, and then the was promoted to oversee that component, and so working directly with the chief sales officer was Michael Ford. Right now, at the time, it was just, and it was very, for me, I felt like a pretty young professional at the time, but it was also challenging, a challenge that I was up for, because I believe in collaboration.
Yeah.
And it was, I felt like I was that bridge. I like the term you use, broker, because I would always call myself the brand activist. But I like brand. I'm gonna have to use I'm a
Yeah.
brand broker now.
Yes, good.
Like that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it just seems to me like you are like you're in between three different people that all want different things, and you're setting it up so they get. I wonder if in those 6 years when you were doing those, if you developed any tools to be able to listen well to the constituents. Like, how did you know your customers, the brands, were getting what they wanted? How did you know that the nonprofits were getting what they wanted? Did you have some tools or some tricks that you learned on how to?
Well, a lot of the corporate engagement was part of contracts. So once we understood what the goals were and we had those collaboration meetings, a lot of that was written out into detail. From the nonprofit standpoint, they had measurement tools as far as the different surveys or impact metrics that they would take as a nonprofit that we would just consider as part of the fold. One of the things that, and I'm glad you asked that question, because on my story, I wanted a sense of more ownership in that, to go deeper, into tracking and making sure that there was someone ensuring that, because you can get busy with all these partnerships. There's marketing that comes in, then there's all the extra layers of PR and all of that, and events that's built out from the strategy. And so I think that's where my company came in, because I felt that there was an opportunity for a consultant to come into
Are you
different.
talking about the company that you're running now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that's where I found my entryway in, that, hey, there has to be someone thinking deeper about the community outreach, philanthropy, and cause marketing. So that's I
Okay.
feel that you're going somewhere, Kyle. You got a
No,
additional
because I wanted to talk about you when you said, okay, I'm gonna start GLB. Um, the focus at the time was what? Was because I just want to give people like the foundation of it. Like the focus was like, hey, you can help athletes or you can just help
Oh yeah.
organizations. Okay.
Yeah. So good question. So I saw in the athletes who they have marketing agents, right? So they would come in, the agents are handling their contracts, endorsements, and all this stuff, and then they were doing community outreach. Where I saw a gap is their strategy towards philanthropy. Again, it was always that thought of, oh, I'm just going to give $10,000 or invest $30,000 to give to the Boys and Girls Club to buy equipment, or let me just donate this money. But there is no thought process on over a long term, like a 3-year, 4-year planning and philanthropy planning that was a part of any of their plans, or they always had someone in place that was not qualified or had no understanding of philanthropy. And
Just like their mama was like writing it, like
yeah.
love something and calls and it's like, baby, write a check over to the United Way, you know.
Yeah, we're just gonna show up and then we're gonna get my friend to come out and play with this kid, and that was
Yeah.
it. I'm like, man, and I will always ask the question, okay, so you did that, but what, because of you doing that, what did you change? And could never answer the question, like, what impact did you make from that?
Right.
And so I felt like I needed to go on that side to help players better understand how their money can really make a difference and over long term, and
Yeah.
not to say that quick solutions aren't important, but with the money that they had the opportunity to do way more than what they were actually doing.
So were you helping these players? So you were helping them develop that plan. And so like isolating, like what is the issue area that they care about? And then understanding like a plan of like, okay, like how do you want this thing to change? And then developing a strategy on how to make that change happen. Like, were you that involved in
No,
it?
well, on the team level, you're not really allowed to be that involved. And so
Okay.
it's we are limited based on the collective bargaining agreement on how much time or how much contributions that we could make towards a player's philanthropic effort. So if they had their foundations, they're a totally separate entity. And
Okay.
so most of the times they were just, it was almost a player appearance, what we called a player appearance. So they were plugged into what we were already doing. But then as they got more involved and I built more relationships, there was this comfortability for them to talk to me like, well, hey, I want to do this or I want to do that. And so I would see how I could mesh them within our parameters of all of the strategies that we had in place. But if it did not align with us and what we were doing, then we could support for afar, but we were not,
Yeah.
allowed to be as fully
But
engaged.
once you moved out of the NBA and working directly with players, were you helping them develop that vision and that strategy?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
I want to ask about right there in that moment, because I like how you had a very intimate knowledge of the problem from firsthand experience, right? Which is a great way for an entrepreneur. And then you see that little opportunity of like curiosity or stability, problem solving or prescribed, right? And so there's something where you have like a 10-year career with the NBA, and then also there's this new thing that sounds like an interesting problem that needs to be solved, right? And so the
Right.
entrepreneur picks the interesting problem, right? And you did it from the right place because you had this intimate knowledge. So I'm thinking of Marco on the call with intimate knowledge of grocers. I'm thinking of Nathan on the call with interesting knowledge of renters, and Shay with interesting knowledge of the safety, the security net solutions, and the bureaucratic problems. So we have these interesting intimate knowledges of the problem. And then I'm thinking, did you have your first customer? Like, how much did you have saved to land on when you're leaving a 10-year career with the NBA? You know, here's this risk-taking thing, or how big was that cliff that you jumped off when you left? Like, did you have a customer lined up? Did you know you
Oh
could get
yeah,
customers?
Ben.
Yeah, you
Oh,
did.
I'm a
Okay, good.
strategist now. I'm a
That's good.
strategist now. I had one lined up that I knew for sure because one of their moms had approached me. And, sometimes we keep things that we're doing to ourselves. And one of the things is that I had shared that, hey, I have this interest in creating this company with someone who was working on the BOP side, that were more engaged with parents, families, and all of that stuff. And so he knew what my aspirations were. And from his conversations, he's like, you know what? I think you should talk to Latria because she may, in fact, be stepping out and doing this on her own at some point.
I
And
love
so,
I love that
yeah,
100%, because I think you're so right. Sometimes we get enamored with the problem in our head, but we're embarrassed or afraid to talk about it. And learning how to talk about it before you leap is really cool. I also like that your risk taker is like this much. That's how much my risk taker is, right?
yeah,
And that you knew people will say there's a problem, but there's actually a problem when they're willing to pay for it, and you
yeah.
jump when you have a customer. I think that's a really good thing for people to consider. Is we know we have a real problem when someone tells us they'll pay for it. We can construct all types of problems in our head, but you went for it when you had identified there's a customer here. It's
Yeah,
time to go. That's really cool.
which is very hard too, because a lot of people who get in this industry to help with sports, with athletes, it's tough. They do a lot of free stuff just to get in and all this stuff. But I was very adamant that I was skilled, knowledgeable. You need this.
Yeah.
And they were willing to pay. So that was a
Yeah.
good thing.
I mean, that's what as Ben was saying, I mean, that's one of the things we try to tell our entrepreneurs is like, it's like, that you have a product market fit when somebody is willing to pay you for it, right?
Yeah.
As long as you're giving it away for free, that means like there's not there, but the value isn't there. I mean, I guess it could be there in some sense because they're willing to engage something for free, but it means something different when they're willing to write you a check, right? And so
Yes.
and it's more, it helps you to rest easier at night knowing that somebody's willing to written you a check, and the question becomes, how can I duplicate this, right? So let's talk about that, right? Like, let's talk about where you're at today. So you initially were just working with athletes, maybe a handful, doing this cause marketing, trying to give them a philanthropic vision, a strategy to lean into with some metrics to determine what the outcomes will be. How has that evolved into what you're doing today? Or is it still the same thing, or has it expanded?
Well, yeah, it's expanded a bit. So we now work with education. So UCF is one of our clients. Same thing, because you got to look at where people are and what problems that they're trying to solve, but just in a different industry. And so obviously, as part of cause marketing, a big piece of that is awareness, right? So once you get your strategy in place, once you have your plan, how do you communicate your plan? And that communication strategy is very critical to and understanding your different audiences. And so my multicultural background, we're specialized too into creating strategy based on different multicultural audiences. So how you can communicate to one audience may not be the best way of communicating to a different audience, and what mechanism do you use. And so you know, some of the strategy is just, hey, we're helping you build a communications or awareness plan, or we are, you know, helping with an event. Obviously, because of COVID, it's not a lot of event management going on right now. But what we saw in that event space, and why I um, added this branded product piece, because everyone knows when you go to an event, as we build brands, we build platforms, we build programs, it's like, okay, well, there's a logo involved. How do we communicate it out? Like, oh, well, let's put it on t-shirts. Let's get some banners made. And so we are a certified distributor. And so we're like a one-stop shop for the customer now. So if they come and say, hey, we help us develop this program, we developed the program. Hey, we want to go to market and spread awareness. Okay, we're going to do PR plan. Hey, you need some shirts that you want to put on people for visual, for branding, all that stuff. So we're able to do that as well. So that allowed us to get into a space with leagues or entities that may not have the opportunity for a consultant to come on board to do, you know, consulting strategy, because they have their own internal team, but they may need some help with other branded awareness products. And so, but they were thinking about it in a unique way. And I think a lot of people look at promotional products, it's just like, oh, these are these nice little cheap giveaways, but it is an advertising strategy. And so I think there's a uniqueness in creating experience in someone's hand with a tangible item, with a brand. And so that part is, you know, took off. You know, what if people came to an event, if we did a launch event for a client, and they're like, oh, who did these? And like, oh, GLB. And so like that side is more transactional, but it just started flowing. And so that's a piece of it. And then now we're working with the Greater Orlando Sports Commission as a client in their FIFA World Cup strategy on human rights. So definitely grown beyond, you know, the singular individual brand, working with larger brands to solve issues. The human rights strategy, we had to convene like 60 stakeholders locally to talk about human trafficking issues in race relations and safety and security, housing, migrant community workers' rights. And so we sort of expanded across, you know, the traditional cause areas. And so in human rights, I believe in this space, in the United States is going to trend more, and more work being done in that area, because I think we're so used to the traditional outreach that now with the turn of events, things are moving a little bit differently, which enhances a lot of the political sensitivity as well, and some of the issues. So it could be difficult in creating collaboration when there's this, like, you got to be on one side, you got to pick a side on an issue. And so, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like, what sides are there to pick on? I mean, human rights is I mean,
well, no,
thing,
well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Latria, I like that. I appreciate that you went through the growth of GLB, because one of the things that we try and convince entrepreneurs of sometimes is that you may have a whole vision of a suite of programs that addresses your issue completely and beautifully. but you can't jump off the cliff and start flying all of these little gliders at the same time. Like, if you're going to get to where you want to go, you got to pick one glider and get that one as far as you can, and then you can add the next one and keep going. And so I like that you started with, you had this one dude who you waited until he was ready to pay you. You didn't do it for free. You had this product market fit. Then you built that out, and as those customers started to ask for new things, or you begin to see new problems, once this is running, you can add the next component and add the next component. I have a question though. When you started with the one guy, did you see all this down here? Was there a degree of it that you saw and some of it that you learned along the way? Or was it all intuitive, going through and adding which programs?
Learning along the way, because the other piece is, again, like I was telling Kyle, like I went into it thinking that I was just going to be working with athletes. I did not know, I didn't have the knowledge, and this is on me for not doing all of my market research, that there were corporate programs too for that there was this desire to work with small businesses and minority and women-owned businesses. So this whole supply diversity thing came at me, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? And getting involved with understanding procurement, how that process works, and that RFPs and doing business that way. And that the government also needs solutions as well, that is not their own internal team. As big as they are, I'm like, well, they got their own team. So my line of work probably would not be something that they need, but obviously discovering that, man, there's this whole other vertical out here that need, beyond the sports athletes, that need this consulting, because they don't have the time to dig deep into. And so I just used it as also a strategy to create the relationships. And once I got in those relationships, just listened and dove deep into all their other needs as I could. But also just being able to wait and having that patience for the right one to come along, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll pivot. Well, I'm going to give up. I don't want to do this anymore if it's not coming in the manner that you want or as quickly as you want. So just sticking to, like, I want to only work with purpose-driven brands, because I've have other athletes approach me to help do their work, but I'm going to ask a lot of other questions about how serious they are and committed they are. Because as we talked about, me being a broker, I'm this connector. And so when I start connecting your name with corporate entities and nonprofits and all of that, then I want to make sure that you are committed to the space, and that you actually have a true, authentic, desire to give back.
So I want to ask you this, and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A. But I was going to ask you, the original question was, but you're still focused on purpose-driven brands, whether that's an individual, because I remember your explanation of how athletes are a brand.
They are,
or an organization, right? And so you answer that question. But I'm curious about what is it? Why only purpose-driven brands? Like, what is it that's compelling about only working with that and putting that fence around and say, listen, this is who you are, and making sure that they're about this? What does it change for you or the community or the work? Like, why is that such an important thing? If you could just kind of talk about that.
Because I know that they're going to stick with it. So if it's part of their purpose for existing, and they're not trying to build PR. We used to have this saying, something called like PR for CR. Like, we do community outreach because we want to build public relations to boost our brand and create awareness. That's great. But if there's no purpose beyond that in it, of solving something, then to
It's a
me,
little
that's not
selfish.
foundational.
Okay.
And that's the difference between marketing and branding. I think when people's like, well, why do you have the name branding in your title? Because they would say, oh, do you do logos? And like they would think as it from a design standpoint. But I look at marketing, branding is setting foundations, principles, and that's the culture that you're setting. Whereas marketing, you're going to go to market. It's like building a house. Like, building the house is branding, putting it on the market is putting up for sale is marketing. And I think a lot of people start with the for sale sign versus really diving deep into the looking at those pillars, those 4 blocks that are building the house up. And so purpose is found in those foundational branding. So that's why I think there are a lot of companies who are now understanding that. I don't think it was that. I'm energized because there's a lot of great conversations going on around different initiatives. But I'm like, I've been talking this talk for a long time. People, where have you been? But of course, I've been looked at as like, oh man, she's just doing way too much. But
Ben has this thing where he said to me once, what is it, man, about pilgrims getting killed or something?
I was about to say it. It's like the pioneers get killed, the settlers prosper. So it's like the first ones out there get beat up. You feel like nobody gets it or understands you. You're lucky to survive, but you made the way. Now it's easy for everybody coming behind you. All the settlers prosper.
Yeah, no, that's
I've been
cool.
a pioneer my whole life.
You're still a pioneer.
Yeah.
Before we open it up, you've given actually a lot of nuggets of wisdom that our entrepreneurs and our fellows and any fellow watching this could take away. But what's that? Can you give, is there any insight that you can give that they can be focused on? Now, these are early stage individuals who are very early in their entrepreneurial journey. Is there any tactical, practical wisdom, whatever that you can give them? Like 1, 2, you can even leave it at 1 if you can't think of 2 or 3.
I would say just having that voice or another voice of a conscience for you, because I do think that as an entrepreneur, we're so excited. We can get on this, like, it's not a bad thing, this area of opportunity, and we can get lost in it. And having an accountability partner or a person that's going to help you keep that balance, and that you're trying to solve all these other problems for other people, but you're creating a problem within yourself. So making sure that you have that accountability partner or person that, or you are proactively taking care of yourself, understanding that in all of this work that we're doing, from a mental health standpoint, that you're doing the things that make you happy outside of bringing that energy and excitement, because I don't feel like I'm working when I'm doing it. That's why I'm like, I can do this all day. Like I can try to solve these problems all day, but, not realizing, I do need to cut off. Sometimes I do need to turn it off and just be present in the moment, and have that balance, and be open to when someone is saying, hey, like, take a break, or go get a massage. So in your servantship, making sure that there's some self-care there.
Man, that's music to my ears. I'm all about being present in the moment, creating some separation. Is there anything else at all? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, fellows, listen up. She's given a lot of information. So what does any fellow have, let me open it up, the gallery view. Do any of you have questions? Nathan? Okay.
All right, Matthew, come on. My favorite.
Hey. Thank you so much. I took a lot of great notes. I was just curious from your perspective. So I totally see how like nonprofits and corporates will want to engage a brand of a player, and even like Orlando Magic, who is just this extensive outreach. What can maybe newer brands to the market do to start to facilitate some of that interest from corporate partners or from nonprofits in terms of thought leadership or in terms of positioning to kind of align? Because we see, I just see tremendous opportunity there, and just trying to figure out from a cause marketing standpoint how to the sequence.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first thing is to research the brand that makes sense for the alignment. So most corporations actually have a bucket list of their focus areas of causes. So like they may say we focus on education, um, um, housing, and homelessness. And that's their three buckets. There's one, Coca-Cola, I believe they focus on women, environment. So corporate brands are typically have some strategy in place that they have to put in place, which it sounds bad because you get so many requests. How do you decline a request? And so they have to get focused in their strategy to make sure that they're like, oh, well, this request came in. Unfortunately, you don't align with our strategy. We can't help you at this time. And so I think really studying the corporation or entity to see what they're passionate about and how you might align. The other strategy too of like creating those relationships and engagement, a lot of people don't realize this is through board service. So sometimes there may be a board of director of about some volunteer time that you may want to use that may have someone that you're trying to create a relationship with, that you could connect through the board. And so I've met a lot of people. I think what helped me in my business and success was the fact that at the time of working with the Magic, I also served on like 10 or 11 boards throughout my career and met so many amazing people. And so once I came out of the team and started my business, they knew me. They would take my call because they weren't, because some people is like, oh, she can't give me tickets anymore, so have any use for her. But I created these relationships, and that's how I was able to get some other clients that for certain projects that we did. And so I would say that's an important piece. So understanding the cause focus of corporations and athletes, I think they are getting this new day athlete, they're getting so focused, and they're different breed than what I was used to of like early on in my career of like, just like, hey, you got to come to this community outreach event. We would have to force a lot of them, but now they're just so proactive and wanting to be involved. And this type of stuff that you guys are doing is part of those conversations. I literally, in my brokerage relationship, I work with the players' financial advisors. And so they're advising them on different models of giving, which sometimes my philosophy may conflict because they may look at another investment pool. Well, hey, let's start looking at this social enterprise products or strategies versus the traditional 501c3 building or the DAFs. And so it's definitely new conversation. I think everything that you guys are doing, it is like in that space is definitely the path that we're going to see trending for pro athlete involvement.
Cool. Let's see, we have time for a couple more questions. Shay, go ahead, Shay, knock it out the park.
Hey, can I ask the Women's History Month question?
Yes.
All right. So, Latria, you were and still are involved in some very male-dominated industries, right?
Yes.
And even if you had come up to ESPN, being kind of close here, we're the home of the Huskies and ESPN, and it's pretty male-dominated.
Yeah.
Besides that, the Lady Huskies are awesome. But so can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, how was that an issue for you? How did you break in as a female?
Yeah, well, I think my philosophy is perform, like do the work, like get results. And if you do that, what I've learned is when I outperform you, there is nothing on the table that you can say or do to neglect the skill level that I have. But I was always learning, always trying to stay ahead of the curve, and also getting relationships that created allies for me. I know Pat Williams, who was the founder of the team, was a big one for me, and understood a lot of things. There were some things that in our relationship he would say that I'm like, well, no, he would say, come on, sweetheart, let's get it going. I was like, yeah, Mrs. Graham. It's like, don't call me sweetheart in front of these HR people. And he would just laugh and like, oh. And every time he was like, I'm sorry. And, he didn't do it intentionally, but he would, just, the lingo around sports of saying like, come on, babe, let's go, toots. And I'm like, toots. I'm like, come on now, you got to do better than that. Like, yeah. It's Mrs. Graham, we're going to do handshakes and all that stuff. And I taught him so much. And I think having that courage to just speak up and say, hey, this is what I prefer, or, is the thing, and not bringing attention to some things that are not, related to the job. Like, I always presented myself with solutions as this expert. I was always told, like, you gotta present yourself as the expert in your field. And so as a woman coming in, I just would do things that no one would think of, but just outworked and outperformed. And so obviously there are some, ceilings that develop, but as any entrepreneur, you find your way. Like, okay, all right, challenge accepted. I will go for that, and I will find another way. So I became what I call the FO, Chief Figure It Out Officer. And so that was part of my job description. I'm like, okay, you've activated CFO in me, so I gotta go.
No, that's cool. Well, we really appreciate the time that you spent here today with us. You didn't let me down, which is, I didn't expect you would let me down.
Come on now.
You brought it. That slogan, that thing, that call that you said that you will hold back on about where you're from. Like, I heard it all through college. It was actually obnoxious. That whole Duval thing. That Duval.
Duval. Sorry, I gotta.
I was like, why? I've never been anywhere where people were more. It was like that in Dade County. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah.
That's a Florida
and the Gator
thing.
Nation. That's the other thing. Go Gators! Chomp, chomp.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, it was a pleasure having you here today. You definitely built the argument on why any entrepreneur from around the world should come and visit us because of people like you. And so I'm really appreciative of your time and honored that you came and spent some time with us today. Okay.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys having me. And I want to commend all of you for everything that you're doing. And you have my information. Reach out if you want to, talk or need some advice. I'm here to help you solve these problems. I always said that once I retire from doing this, I was going to go work for the police department, because I do believe that I will be a great forensic files expert in my problem solving journey. I have developed this obsession just with solving cases. It's crazy. And I didn't put the correlation with my real work and that. But so, along this journey, you may find me somewhere helping solve cold cases in the day. But in the meantime, if you need anything, let me know. If you need any advice, help, I'm here to support you all, and keep up the great work. Keep going. Don't stop.